For centuries, historians trusted the medieval timeline without question, until a bold theory claimed nearly 300 years, from 614 to 911 AD, never happened. What if Charlemagne was a myth? What if the Vatican, emperors, and popes rewrote time to secure power? The implications are staggering: forged documents, false dates, and a timeline built on illusion. Now, new evidence emerges from hidden archives and scientific analysis. And if it's true, our history may be a lie. The Phantom Centuries. In about the year AD 614, a theory claims that history took a sharp wrong turn and nearly 297 years vanished until AD 911. The so-called Phantom Centuries propose that Europe's early Middle Ages were partly fabricated. Proponents suggest that key figures like Charlemagne, died 814, never existed, or that their lives were shifted in time. The implications extend to educational curricula, national narratives, and even the accepted timeline of the Holy Roman Empire. According to the theory first outlined by Herbert Illig in 1991, powerful elites around the year 1000 CE manipulated documents and calendars to place themselves at a symbolic genesis point. The argument uses the alleged gap from 614 to 911 to suggest artificial extension of years, thereby positioning rulers such as Otto III and Pope Sylvester II at the turn of the millennium. Evidence cited includes the claim of sparse artifacts from the alleged missing period, stagnation in architectural style between the 7th and 10th centuries, and the ambiguity of certain manuscripts. Advocates point to the lack of continuous archaeological sequences covering those exact years. At the same time, skeptics argue that the archaeological record is simply patchy, not missing. If this theory were true, our understanding of medieval Europe and Christendom would be deeply shaken. The years, the emperors, the cultural evolutions we take for granted might be built on a facade of manufactured time. History would become not just what happened, but what we were told happened. And we might be missing nearly 3 centuries of human experience. If entire years were taken away or inserted, the question quickly shifts to who would control that timeline. To answer that, we must look at the institution with power over calendars, laws, and legitimacy. The Church. The role of the Church in the calendar. The theory credits the Catholic Church, and in particular the papacy, as a prime actor in shaping and possibly manipulating the timeline. Between the years 800 and 1000, the Church expanded its temporal control over Central Europe, using documents like the Donation of Constantine, forged in the 8th century, to justify dominion. The argument is that altering the calendar or time count would naturally augment papal legitimacy. Calendar reform is central. The shift from the Julian to the Gregorian calendar in 1582 is often cited in this context, but proponents say deliberate time shifts may have occurred earlier, e.g., to align year 1000 CE with papal and imperial reigns. The calendar becomes not just a tool for measuring days, but an instrument of power. The Vatican's archives are portrayed as repositories of suppressed knowledge and possibly hidden directives used to manipulate chronology. If key documents were forged, altered, or withheld, the trust in official records breaks down. The question is, did the Church orchestrate history or simply preserve it? The theory leans to the former. If the Church helped craft these phantom centuries, the mystery rises from missing time to engineered time. History becomes a program of legitimacy rather than a record of change. The stakes shift from archaeological gaps to institutional conspiracy, making the narrative about power, control, and perception. While the motive may rest with the Church and calendar reforms, we must examine whether the evidence holds up. Next, we review the arguments for and against the missing time claim and what historians make of the gaps. The evidence for and against. On one side, the for argument notes apparent gaps in the historical record for the years AD 614 to 911. Scholars point to fewer surviving manuscripts, less architectural innovation, and scarce artifacts as potential signs of missing time. The premise? If entire centuries were real, we'd see stronger continuity. Opposing this are multiple lines of cross-disciplinary data. Astronomical records, eclipses documented in China, Europe, and the Islamic world, mesh with the accepted chronology rather than a 300-year gap. Tree ring, dendrochronology, and carbon-14 dating likewise show consistent sequences through the supposed missing period. These scientific methods seriously undermine the missing time hypothesis. Academic consensus is strongly skeptical. The mainstream view, while gaps exist, they are explained by the turbulent history of the early medieval era, wars, migrations, loss of records, not by wholesale invention of years. The theory is widely labeled pseudo-history, meaning it is treated as an interesting idea, but lacking credible evidence. Even so, the theory's endurance reveals something. Our historical foundations are built on partial documentation and institutional interpretation. Whether the 297 years vanished or not, the silence in some records, the potential for forgery, like the donation of Constantine, and the gaps in material culture all invite deeper questions about how we know what we think we know about the past. Who would benefit if time was altered? History is rarely neutral. The theory that nearly 300 years of European chronology, specifically from 614 to 911, were fabricated raises the question of motive. Who stood to gain from such a fabrication? Political actors like Otto III, ruling around a D1000, might have found symbolic power in aligning their reigns with the start of a new millennium. That artificial placement in time would cast their rule as divinely ordained and historically pivotal. For the papacy, reshaping the timeline could secure ecclesiastical dominance. The alignment of Pope Sylvester II with Otto III wasn't just coincidence, according to proponents. It was strategy. Tying their authority to a manipulated date legitimized the Church's temporal control, especially if the forged donation of Constantine, used in the 8th century, served as precedent. That document alone reshaped central Italy's political structure, allegedly with one false claim. Mythmakers and chroniclers also benefit from adjusted timelines. The narrative of Charlemagne, emperor, saint, and founder of Europe, becomes a powerful political symbol, especially if he didn't exist or his reign was manipulated. A fabricated hero bridges the gap between ancient Rome and medieval Christendom, giving Europe a tailored origin story. Such tales anchor nations in identity and righteousness. Finally, by controlling the calendar itself, rulers could manipulate records of birth, death, reign, and succession. Chronology, when altered, reshapes every downstream document. Genealogies shift. Wars are redated. The tapestry of European history becomes pliable, twisted to suit those in charge. The theory paints a chilling picture. That time itself was once a tool of propaganda. Motive is compelling, but so is physical evidence. To truly test the theory, we must look to buildings, artifacts, and bones. If time was invented, would archaeology remain silent or speak up? Architecture, art, and archaeology. In the heart of Europe, between the 7th and 10th centuries, something strange happens. Architectural styles remain eerily static. Churches built in the 10th century closely resemble those allegedly from the 7th century. For phantom time proponents, this stagnation suggests not continuity, but invention. They argue that if 297 years never happened, architectural evolution would appear to stall, which is exactly what's seen in places like Germany and northern France. Artifact counts also dropped during this interval. Compared to earlier Roman layers and later Gothic remains, the archaeological footprint from the supposed missing centuries is noticeably thin. In burial sites, continuity is present, but innovation is often lacking. This has led some to suggest that even graves might have been redated, or that centuries of material culture were simply backfilled from surrounding periods. And on the other side, forensic archaeologists argue for continuity. Radiocarbon dating from grave sites and structures often shows an unbroken chain through the 614 to 911 period. For example, dendrochronology in European forests provides tree rings for each year going back thousands of years, including those in the disputed gap. While artifacts are sparse, the biological and geological timelines don't break. So does stagnation mean centuries didn't happen? Or does it reflect a time of cultural regression, war, and poor record keeping? Scholars caution against equating silence with absence. But the fact remains, Europe's historical and artistic output during those nearly 300 years is strangely quiet. Whether this is evidence of loss or fabrication remains contested. If archaeology raises questions, then the secrets hidden in sacred archives may hold answers. We now turn to the Vatican itself, whose locked vaults may conceal a timeline rewritten in silence. The Vatican archives and the secrets within. Deep within Vatican City, under the gaze of saints and marble angels, lies the Vatican Apostolic Archive, once known as the Secret Archives. Stretching over 53 miles of shelving, this archive houses documents dating back over 1,200 years, possibly including records from the disputed 614 to 911 era. Yet access is limited. Only scholars with special permission can review selected files, 3 documents at a time. Why such secrecy? The phantom time hypothesis suggests this is not accidental. If key documents were forged, or if years were deliberately inserted into the calendar, the evidence, or at least the directives, may lie in these vaults. The donation of Constantine, a proven forgery, once sat within these shelves and shaped medieval geopolitics. What else could remain undisclosed? The archives have long fueled conspiracy. Historians have requested access to verify questionable manuscripts, but many claims are denied or delayed. The Church has said this is to protect fragile documents and limit tampering. Yet, some suspect the aim is to shield truth. If the timeline was manipulated, even partially, that truth would fracture the foundations of Western history. If forged years are buried under seals and dust, their exposure could upend academic consensus and institutional trust. The silence of the Vatican archive is not just about documents, it's about the timeline itself. As long as large portions remain inaccessible, speculation will thrive. The question lingers, is the Church guarding history or hiding it? From secret archives to sacred emperors, we now turn to Charlemagne, the supposed father of Europe. If his reign falls apart under scrutiny, it's not just years that vanish, but legacies. Charlemagne, the Carolingians, and the gap. To challenge the historical existence of Charlemagne is to shake the core of European identity. Known as the father of Europe, Charlemagne supposedly ruled from 768 to 814 AD, united much of Western Europe, and was crowned Emperor of the Romans in 800 AD. But if the phantom time hypothesis is correct, then his reign might have been either fabricated or misplaced, raising the unsettling possibility that Charlemagne never existed at all. The Carolingian dynasty, including Charlemagne and his successors, dominates the disputed centuries. Their legacy includes military campaigns, legal reforms, and architectural projects like the Palatine Chapel in Aachen. Yet much of what we know comes from documents like the Royal Frankish Annals and Vita Caroli Magni, both written under imperial patronage. Critics argue that these sources are suspiciously idealized, possibly retroactively written to justify a narrative. Even physical traces fall under scrutiny. The Aachen Palace Chapel, attributed to circa 792, is real, but its exact dating has been debated. Some architectural styles seem too advanced for the supposed era, raising the theory that it might be older or younger than claimed. If these sites are misdated, or if their construction dates were backfilled to support a false timeline, then the illusion of continuity collapses. If Charlemagne was a myth or a rearranged figure, then the legitimacy of medieval kingships and the idea of a restored Roman Empire through the Church-Emperor alliance evaporates. The entire structure of Western Christendom, built from AD 800 onward, would sit on an invented past. It's not just dates in danger, it's the foundations of faith, empire, and Europe itself. But could a manipulation of this scale go unnoticed globally? If 300 years vanished in Europe, other civilizations must have seen or ignored the change. To test the theory, we look outward. Other civilizations and cross-checks. If 297 years were fabricated in Europe, other global histories from the 7th to 10th centuries must also misalign. But they don't. The Tang dynasty in China, spanning 618 to 907 AD, produce verifiable records, poetry, astronomical logs, and detailed bureaucratic archives. These texts align with known eclipse data and show no suspicious gaps. The Islamic Golden Age also flourished in this period. From Baghdad's House of Wisdom to scholars like al-Khwarizmi and al-Razi, intellectual output between 800 and 900 AD was immense. Their manuscripts, translated centuries later in Europe, show independent continuity. These records were written in Arabic and Persian, disconnected from European church oversight, which undermines the idea of a synchronized time deception. Astronomical alignments further challenge the theory. Eclipses, planetary movements, and comet paths, such as Halley's Comet, appearing in 837 AD, are consistent across European, Islamic, and Chinese records. These celestial markers function like cosmic timestamps. They cannot be forged or shifted without massive, global collusion across cultures that never communicated directly. Dendrochronology and ice core layers from places like Greenland and Scandinavia confirm uninterrupted annual sequences. Each tree ring and ice layer is a year, unbroken from today back to antiquity. This natural data contradicts any alleged 300-year absence. If the Vatican forged time, nature didn't agree. So if nature, astronomy, and global records disagree, does that mean the theory collapses? Not entirely. The implications of even partial manipulation remain profound. Let's explore what this would truly mean. If the theory were true. Imagine the history books you studied in school. All the names, wars, treaties, resting on 300 years that never happened. If the phantom time hypothesis were true, then our entire chronology, especially from 614 to 911 AD, is built on fiction. This would not be a correction. It would be a rewriting of civilization's framework. Institutions whose origin stories lie in this period, nations, monarchies, the Holy Roman Empire, and even the Catholic Church, would face existential crisis. Their authority, forged during a potentially fabricated era, would crumble under scrutiny. If Charlemagne's 800 AD coronation never happened, then the legitimacy of kings and bishops who followed him vanishes. Worse still, modern science would be caught in the crossfire. If those 297 years were inserted, then radiocarbon dating, dendrochronology, and other scientific tools would need recalibration. Entire disciplines would be under question. Have we interpreted the physical world wrong? Or worse, have we blindly built knowledge on doctored data? Culturally, the rupture is devastating. Europe's narrative of rising from Rome's ashes, through darkness to Renaissance, becomes fragmented. The idea of progress from the 5th century fall to the 12th century rebirth would lose its arc. History would become less a record of events, more a carefully constructed myth. The implications reach beyond scholarship, into identity, law, and belief. Yet even with all evidence stacked against it, the theory refuses to die. Perhaps because the final mystery isn't just about missing time, but about who controls time's telling. Let's conclude. The verdict and the mystery that remains. The academic consensus is clear. The phantom time hypothesis is unproven and largely discredited. Historians cite solid counter-evidence, astronomy, archaeology, dendrochronology, to uphold traditional chronology. As of 2024, no peer-reviewed study confirms a fabricated era between 614 and 911 AD. Yet the theory persists, not in lecture halls but online, in documentaries and whispered by conspiracy theorists. Because it taps into a deeper fear that history isn't just flawed, but deliberately manipulated. Forgeries like the donation of Constantine, Vatican secrecy, and suspicious gaps in the record give just enough plausibility to keep doubt alive. And even if no centuries were deleted, the underlying concern remains valid. History is written by the victors, and in the case of medieval Europe, often by the Church. If not 300 years, then what else might have been altered? What documents were lost or burned in pursuit of power? Ultimately, the theory is less about one missing period and more about our trust in history itself. As long as archives remain closed, questions remain unanswered, and narratives are controlled by few, the timeline is never beyond suspicion. The danger isn't in lost centuries, it's in the belief that we ever had certainty. Perhaps we haven't lost time, but faith. And in a world where the past shapes identity and power, questioning the timeline isn't just subversive, it's essential. Because truth, like time, should be tested. If 3 centuries of history were fabricated, what else have we misunderstood? While mainstream scholars reject the theory, gaps in documents, forged decrees, and Vatican secrets will keep the mystery alive. Whether the timeline was altered or not, the very possibility reveals something chilling. Those who control history control reality. Until every vault is opened and every secret revealed, we're left asking, how much of the past is fact and how much is fiction?